Hello, eyebrows.
Fill your cups. Feel no distress at all our great thoughts shrinking less,
He repeated. He continued his stare, unwavering. Look. I have this letter,
I don't know what that is, but it ain't the password.
came the response, the small window shut with a thud. Do you know the password to this place? The tin spoon doormat kept me outside the joint. He wants a password, but I have no ideas. Fill full your cups, feel no distress, at all our great thoughts shrinking less, he says. Who knew gangsters were the riddling type? Frankie laughed. All our great thoughts shrinking less, he said. I forgot his voice. What? I asked, puzzled. He turned and grabbed a bottle from his shelf. Vintage stuff, this. Strange that you'd use it as their code. He handed me the bottle and I read the back of the label. Fill full your cups, feel no distress, at all our great thoughts shrinking less. We'll do a good deed nevertheless. So the password was the poem from this vintage label. I now knew what I had to say to the doorman. Knock knock. Haha, I know this now. Is it not gonna, is it this? We'll do a good deed nevertheless. I recited the line that Frankie had shown me on one of his bottles. The eye squinted.
Wait here,
Came the gruff response. The panel slid shut and I heard footsteps walking away. I rolled a cigarette and waited. After a quarter of an hour, the panel opened again.
Door's closed, but you can shoot pool in the upstairs room,
said the eyes. He pulled the door ajar so I could see a set of metal stairs. Ooh, spooky. Oh, hello, another friend. This is a guillotine? Oh, it's a bar stool. I walked up the stairs and opened the thin wooden door to the billiards room. It was much smaller than I had expected for a gangster's paradise. The only light came from the hanging lamps above the billiards table. The haze of cigarette smoke darkened the room's corners. Who are you? I saw a tall, broad-shouldered man playing the table by himself. Based on Frankie's description, I gathered this was Tiny Paul. Were you the one at the door? Oh yeah, his voice was deep. Okay. I cleared my throat too. So glad the demon voice is getting a bigger part. I cleared my throat to get him to look at me, then followed with a casual, "Are you ever gonna take a shot?" He stood up straight, rested his cue on the table, and looked at me sideways. It was the petulant look of a boy forced to play with his younger sibling.
Hello,
he sighed. His voice was deep, all right. Apparently, Fetty only hired baritones, but it had no gravel. It echoed slightly around the small room. I imagined he could have huffed and puffed an entire block to rubble.
I like watching them,
he said, nodding to the balls on the table.
Thinking about my options.
I'd never shot much pool, but I thought he might like me more if I feigned interest. I considered lying to him, telling him I played a lot. I'll stick to cards. I didn't lie to him just then.
Stud, blackjack, or bridge?
He asked hoarsely. I raised an eyebrow, and he showed a sheepish grin.
A gambler plays them all,
he continued after cracking his knuckles.
But I don't think you're here for a game. Would you like to play a game?
I totally peaked my audio, I'm sorry. I'm destroying your ears. I asked about Green. How's the gamble on that wine? He grunted.
Green's setting it up. We're the muscle. What more is there?
You like Green? I asked. The wrinkles on his brow deepened.
Like or dislike, it don't matter sometimes. I work with what I'm given, and he's giving us a good lead. I suppose that's why you're here, Malone.
So he'd known me too. The doorman must have looked me up. The bay talks fast.
Anyhow,
he said, eyeing the billiards table.
You need anything else from me? If you want something better,
Mobsters never failed to grate my nerves. He wouldn't tell me anything unless I pushed him with what I already knew. I'll show him the letter first, I guess. See if he knows that his dude is being threatened. Know anything about this note? I asked, and pulled out the letter with the black hand on it. Tiny Paul looked at the page, then laughed with his whole body.
So there is a letter. Green's shaking over that. I'm not losing sleep, though. Look, Green and I aren't best pals, but nobody will touch him with our protection. And none of us sent it to him. Or else I would know about it. Anything else?
Specifically that it's fake? You know, Green's note is a fake, I said.
So somebody's goofing Green.
He laughed heartily.
Or maybe Green's just toying with you.
He blew chalk off the end of his pool cue and asked,
Anything else?
Oh yeah, she's a singer here. Green's wife is a torture here? I asked. Paul smiled.
With the pipes she got built into that body, she's the reason most fellas keep coming back to the joint.
Oh, maybe we should gossip about Stable? Know anything about Redstone Stable? I asked.
Heard the name.
He replied.
The gossip. He could tell you more about himself.
You won't give me anything on him?
Now why would I do that?
He shook his head and asked. Maybe that it's, from a wine bottle? We'll do a good deed nevertheless, I repeated to Paul. Why make an old liquor slogan your password? Paul smiled.
An old liquor slogan? That's rich. And here I thought you dicks were supposed to be learned.
I raised a questioning brow.
It's called The Drinking Song, a poem by Thomas Hardy, an old Brit.
I asked more about the poem.
It's all about man thinking we're on top of the chain and slowly understanding we aren't. All our thoughts, all our theories amount to nothing. We're just apes, floating in the wide ocean of space. How can we possibly cope with that? How do we even know that we are in hell? But to hell with it, take your mind off it. Have a drink and do something good. Not a bad code if you ask me.
Oh, my throat.
Why did I give him this voice?
I tilted my head, neither agreeing or disagreeing, but simply impressed by Paul's knowledge of Victorian poetry. Alright, that's enough of a lesson. Is there— oh.
Alright, that's enough of a lesson. Is there something else you wanted, or can I get back to this?
Tickets. I considered telling Tiny Paul about Green's tickets to St. Louis, but if these mobsters thought that Green was about to blow town, they'd be liable to dig him an early grave. I still needed to solve my case, and for that I needed my employer alive. Maybe after it all cleared up, I'd mention Green's tickets. I must have been lost in thought, because Tiny Paul said,
Can I get already?
I didn't have anything else to say to him, so he cracked his knuckles, arced over the table, and resumed lining up shots. Maybe by now I'll either have gotten a call, or Mrs. Green will be sober. I don't want to talk, my throat hurts, and it's my own doing. Shipment's message? No! Help. I wondered aloud how I could get more dirt on Green's bootlegging. Frankie thought about it too. He offered, well, Green's working with Tiny Paul on this scheme. If I were to buy from a new source, I'd have to try it. Get a taster. I continued his thought. So there's likely a sample of Green's stuff lying around the tin spoon. That would make sense. Maybe I can ask Paul about whatever booze I find in there. Hello, Tiny Paul. Investigate Boots' greenlegging. Investigate Green's bootlegging. So you're giving Green the dough? I asked.
That's right. We gave him the cash to get the supply going.
You already gave him the money? Aren't you afraid he's gonna run out on you? I asked. Tiny Paul frowned.
I suppose you know less than I thought. Well, just to set you straight. That gets right under my thumb. No way he'd get out of Source town for a horse.
Do you know anything about this? No.
I'm not one profession.
Sure. Damn. I'll try to talk to Mrs. Green again. Making good time.
Bah. Congestion.
All these motorists, and not one of them knows how to drive. Lunatics!
We crested another hill and my head bounced off the car's ceiling.
Those folks ought to run moonshine at home, then take the car to the speaky. Can't even walk and then think they can handle the road.
The car's tires squealed as we rounded a corner.
Not me, sister. This car leaps when I put my foot down, but you just gotta know what you're doing.
We screeched to a halt at my destination. I stumbled out of the taxicab as quickly as possible, thankful to still have every limb. Well, Miss Malone, will there be anything else? I mean, most people are... What do you mean? Oh, the photo was taken. I thought, like, his life was taken. He died at the end of his life. I asked him further question, grandfather, but he refused to elaborate. Everyone is so cagey. Thinking this difficult? Oh no. Okay, I'm looking it up. I'm stuck. My apologies, but I'm just not clever enough for this. Evidence, tin spoon, wine bottle. Was there a wine bottle? Oh, I didn't see a wine bottle. Is there a wine bottle? Where? Where? Oh, ho, ho! I sniffed it. It smelled of strong spice. Hey, I recognize that spice. That's the Zinfandel grapes. I know these grapes. That bottle on the table? I asked. He said,
That's the stuff. A sample from Great Source.
I know some Napa wine that smells exactly like it, I said to him.
That's so.
He smiled.
Well, that one's from Vancouver.
I had to work every muscle in my face to stop my jaw from hitting the floor. Where's the wine from, Paul? I asked him again.
It's from Vancouver,
He repeated. Frankie had told me that only Napa grapes had this type of spice. If Paul didn't know this bottle was local, I wasn't going to tell him. But it told me something very important. I had to confirm with Frankie, but if my hunch was on the money, then Connor Green was not getting his wine from Canada, and he wasn't playing square with Tiny Paul. So I guess Mr. Green is screwing over the mob to get money for the St. Louis tickets. Huh? Alright, so I need to talk with you now. I looked at Frankie. What's eating at you, kid? He asked.
Tiny Paul thinks his wine is from Vancouver, even though it isn't.
Well, you'll like this, I told him. Remember that wine you offered me? Oh, as Zinfandel you nearly finished. Where did you say that grape was from? It's from here, California. Napa or Sonoma. You sure? Yes, Malone. That's the only place these grapes grow nowadays. And not Canada, I asked. What are you swinging at, Malone? Tiny Paul had a bottle of wine that tasted the exact same, that identical spice. He said it was from Green's bootlegging source, from Vancouver. Malone, I'm telling you, he said, no wine anywhere else in the world has that spice. It ain't from Vancouver, and Green ain't getting it cheap. I nodded. Well, you just confirmed my hunch. Green's got no source. He must be swindling Tiny Paul and the entire fatty gang. And I bet he'll run away with the money. Frankie let out a long whistle in disbelief. Just then, the phone rang. Frankie picked up with a, hello? Right. Then handed me the receiver, saying, Shipman. PC, he said, his excited voice crackling the speaker. Find anything on Green? I asked. Nothing, he said. I was puzzled. Then why'd you call? That's the idea.
First got pinched for a brawl in the ferry building. That was in November 1920. Before that, no Connor Green anywhere around the bay. Strange, he continued. Has trouble staying out of a mess, mixed up in something nearly every week. So only appearing a few years ago? That Oakland backstory is Swiss cheese.
Full of holes. What are you thinking? Green's got a different past? I asked.
Uh-huh, he said. Guess that he just got here in 1920 and never been straight about where he's from.
Wait, I said. If Connor Green was a criminal in another town, easily some cop would recognize the name and send him back home. SFPD isn't that thick.
Right,
Shipman agreed.
If it's the same name, could be his real identity disappeared in another town?
I thought aloud. So he might have changed lives. Is there any way to confirm that?
If Green fled, the local polls would keep looking for him, but not if they thought he died. Get these cases sometimes where mobsters fake a death to escape a burg. Use a mangled stiff to do it. Someone unrecognizable. That way they get out of town without a chase.
Ho ho ho, your number's up. Got any mobster deaths in 1920? Really? Yeah, definitely, I asked.
A ton! Too many to look through. But narrow the search for me. A town he might be from. I could check a specific city's archive.
Anything
in your notes that tells us where he could be from?
Tickets from to St. Louis? If he wants to go back home? But if he's running from the mob, why would he go back to St. Louis? But that's all we have, so let's go with it. I found some tickets to St. Louis in Green's apartment, I told him. The missus was ruffled when I picked them up. I stayed on the telephone while Shipman used another line to call his contact in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I was nursing a glass of gin when he got back to me.
Lucky break, PC! Seems there's one that fits the bill!
He read aloud an article from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, dated October 8, 1920.
Gun battle at June's Diner. Gangster dead. Suspected bandit clubhouse scene of another shooting. A heated argument turned deadly Thursday at multiple shots rang inside June's Diner on 14th Street, suspected hideout of Egan's Rats. A man was found dead at the scene, unidentified due to shotgun wounds to his face. Police suspect he is mobster Brig the Jester, who had hired a private eye to investigate threats on his life. Last month, Chief of Police Brannon said investigating gangster-on-gangster deaths was a waste of time, and the discovery of the threats leads many to believe police won't look further into the case.
Hold on, I said. This Bregg character had hired a private detective.
Seems police are quick to forget a case, if they got a reason to think it's just gangster violence.
That lines up with Green, I said.
Gets better. Bregg's first name? Connor!
I cursed loudly through the telephone. He's setting you up, Malone. I continued with my theory. And your story says this Bregg was deeply indebted, so maybe Green's just waiting in San Francisco until he's got enough dough to skip town and go home.
He have some bootlegging business?
Shipman asked.
Why would he leave that behind?
No, I shook my head. His wine is complete bunk. It's local stuff, not any Canadian route he might be claiming. I didn't know why he'd pull a fast one until now.
Returning Bregg to St. Louis could be huge! Swing by the station. We'll iron it all out.
I agreed and slammed the receiver on its pegs. It seemed I needed to make my way back to the station. So what's the news on Green? Frankie asked as I was headed up the stairs. Now it seemed like I had all the details. I summarized it for him. So, the total wrap. Green isn't really green at all. He's Breg the Jester, a former member of Egan's Rats from St. Louis.
He's Breg?
Frankie was shocked.
Well, he's been here a while, Malone.
I'm losing his accent. I'm sorry, he's starting to sound like Goofy.
Yuck.
Sure, I said. But since 1920, he couldn't pay off his debts in Missouri, so he faked his death and moved to San Francisco. He's been longing to go back, but he needs a way to settle his score before he can show his face again.
Is that where his bootlegging comes in?
Frankie asked. Uh-huh. Green set up a sham rum running scheme. He bought local wine, but claimed to get it at lower prices from Canada. He convinced Tiny Paul to front him a heap of cash for it. Instead of providing the wine, he's planning to skip town with Paul's money, disappearing to St. Louis with enough dough to pay back his debts.
He already faked his death once, so he'll do it again here?
Frankie asked. That's right. His plan is similar to his last one. Hire a detective claiming he's scared for his life, fake his death, then know the police won't bother with underground violence. Frankie looked at me with a blank stare.
Seems like all the pieces fit, he said. So he just hired you as cover?
I sighed. Seems like it.
Don't worry about that,
Frankie started saying, but I cut him off. I'm going to see Shipman now. I'll sweep away this mess, then come back and see you. Have a stiff drink ready, I instructed.
Just be careful, Malone. Egan's Rats have a reputation. They can be ruthless.
I turned and walked up the stairs.
Ho ho ho,
There was only one place to go. The police station. But that is all for this time.